So starting with the Virginia's COVID-19 emergency temporary standard, Virginia was the first state in the entire country to enact its own workplace standard. And really what it's intended to do was to say, okay, we understand that you've got guidance from the CDC. We understand that there is guidance from OSHA. There's a lot of federal things out there, but we're going to enact something that applies to Virginia employers. And so really what it was trying to say is that we're going to regulate businesses and talk about what's the standard to control, prevent, and mitigate COVID-19 and the spread of it in a workplace. So many employers may not know about, you think about OSHA, and that's a federal program. And what OSHA does is it sets out the health standards for a workplace safety. And so if you're in the construction industry, railroad industry, manufacturing industry, a lot of those will be very familiar with what the OSHA requirements are in health and safety in the workplace. Some of your other businesses may not have had the occasion in the past to have to worry about it as much. It doesn't mean it didn't apply, but it wasn't something that became a big issue for you. What that is that, okay, OSHA is the federal law, and then because it's a federal system, each state participates, but each state is allowed to create their own program, and Virginia is such a state. So it created its own workplace safety, and it's under the Virginia Occupational Safety and Health Program, or VOSH. And VOSH is under the Department of Labor and Industry in Virginia. So what they did is they enacted an emergency temporary standard, which is an extensive list of requirements that employers within the VOSH jurisdiction have to do. So the question is, are you an employer within the VOSH jurisdiction in Virginia? And for most employers, the answer is going to be yes. Unless you fall under a separate federal law, such as mine and safety, railroad, if you're a trucking company, there are a number of federal laws that specifically apply to you. So if you don't fall under one of those, then the general belief here in general law is that you would be covered by this emergency temporary standard enacted by VOSH. So because it's an emergency temporary standard, it was enacted in July 27th, and it wasn't given a whole lot of information or publicity ahead of time before it was going to become effective. So I think it took a lot of employers off guard. Frankly, I think there's still a lot of employers who are not even aware of this law and what they're required to do. So the idea was that it was going to go into effect. It was going to be effective for about 6 months. And then when the governor's state of emergency expired, or 6 months, whichever occurred first, it would sunset, it would end. Then because of sort of the idea of whether this should become a permanent standard, that was something that the Virginia Health and Safety Codes Board decided to reconsider and make this permanent. So there was a hearing, and there was an awful lot of pushback by a number of businesses, and particularly the Manufacturing Association and businesses who are manufacturers. But in addition to a lot of other businesses who said, wait a minute, you know, we're already dealing with a lot of challenges right now. We're just trying to keep our head above water. We're trying to deal with, you know, all of this, keep our employees going, keep safety. So we really don't want to have this additional layer of regulation on us. And sometimes it creates some ambiguity, particularly as it may not always correspond exactly with what the CDC's guidance is, or sometimes the CDC's guidance actually changes or is updated. And because you've got this standard that went into a place in July, it may not always correspond to what the CDC's new guidance is. So it creates a little bit of a challenge, but I think, you know, overall, I think we can kind of work through that and help you understand what you have to do in order to comply with this standard. As I said, it's scheduled to sunset on July 27th of 2021. And as I said, they're looking at potentially making this a permanent standard. There is a hearing scheduled now, it looks like, I think, at the beginning of December, where the Virginia Safety and Health Codes Board is going to consider, again, whether to make it permanent. And I've given you some, a website down here where you might be able to kind of follow that and see. I don't know whether they're going to be accepting any more public comment on that, because that was one of the things that they were particularly doing at the last hearing. But, you know, obviously, if this becomes a permanent standard, then you definitely will want to make sure that you are in full compliance. And then as the standard may be changed, you want to make sure you are following that.